It was just another late night for Emily, a quiet college student who preferred the company of books over people. The campus library was her sanctuary, a place where she could escape into the worlds hidden between the pages of her favorite novels. But on this particular night, as she sat in her usual corner, surrounded by stacks of books, she noticed something strange. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, and suddenly the lights flickered. Emily glanced up, expecting the library staff to announce closing time, but there was no one around. The once busy space was eerily silent, the usual hum of activity replaced by a heavy stillness. She realized she was completely alone. Shrugging off the odd feeling, she packed up her things and prepared to leave. But as she walked towards the exit, she noticed something out of place. At the far end of the library, where she had never ventured before, there was a door she had never seen. It was slightly ajar, and a faint, warm light spilled out from the crack. Curious, and with nothing better to do, Emily approached the door. The plaque above it read Special Collections, but she knew this section didn't exist on any map of the library she had seen. Her hand hesitated on the doorknob, a strange sense of unease washing over her, but curiosity won out, and she slowly pushed the door open. Inside was a small room, lined with shelves that reached up to the ceiling, each packed tightly with old, dusty books. Unlike the rest of the library, this room was warm, almost inviting. The scent of aged paper filled the air, and the soft glow of a single lamp on a wooden desk in the center of the room illuminated the space. On the desk lay a large, leather-bound book, its cover cracked with age and no title in sight. Something about the book drew her in. It felt as though it was waiting for her. Without thinking, Emily sat down at the desk and opened it. The pages were thick and yellowed, filled with elegant handwriting. She flipped through the pages, but there were no stories, no poems, just a list of names. Some she recognized, names of authors and scholars long dead, but most were unfamiliar. As she reached the end of the book, she noticed that the last page was blank, save for one line at the top, "Write your name." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the page, her mind racing. What kind of book was this? Why would anyone want her to write her name in it? A sudden chill ran down her spine, and for the first time, she felt a strong urge to leave, to put the book down and walk out of that room. But then, as if in a trance, she picked up the pen lying beside the book, and slowly, almost unwillingly, wrote her name on the blank line. The ink bled into the paper, dark and permanent. The moment she finished, the air in the room changed. The warm, comforting atmosphere turned cold and oppressive. The light from the lamp dimmed, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and grow. Emily quickly stood up, knocking the chair over in her haste. The book snapped shut on its own, the loud clap of the covers echoing in the small room. Panic gripped her as she backed away, her eyes fixed on the book as if it might leap off the table at any moment. Without thinking, she turned and fled from the room, slamming the door behind her. She ran through the now darkened library, her footsteps echoing unnaturally in the empty space. When she finally reached the front doors, they wouldn't budge. She tugged and pulled, but it was as if they were sealed shut. Suddenly, the lights went out completely, plunging her into darkness. Emily's breathing grew rapid, her heart pounding in her chest. She fumbled for her phone to use as a flashlight, but when she turned it on, the screen displayed only static, flickering and buzzing. The only source of light was a faint glow coming from the direction of the Special Collections room. Emily's hands shook as she moved away from the front doors, the eerie light drawing her back down the long, darkened aisles. Her feet moved almost of their own accord, carrying her back to that strange room. She pushed the door open once more, half expecting the room to have vanished, but it was still there, unchanged, except for one thing. The book was now open again, but this time, it displayed a new page. Emily approached cautiously, her pulse racing. As she peered down at the page, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The page was filled with a story about her. It detailed everything that had happened since she entered the room, every thought, every action, written in the same elegant handwriting she had seen earlier, and at the bottom of the page, a new line was being written, as if by an invisible hand. Emily's story doesn't end here. She watched in horror as the ink formed the words, spelling out a future she couldn't escape. It described her standing in that very room, reading those very words, just as she was now. Then, the text continued, predicting what she would do next, step by step. Emily couldn't tear her eyes away, even as the words foretold her own doom. The story detailed how she would try to leave again, how the door would lock behind her, trapping her in the library. It described how she would run through the aisles, searching for an escape, only to be pursued by shadows that would emerge from the shelves. It spoke of how those shadows would close in on her, suffocating her, driving her to the brink of madness. Desperate, Emily slammed the book shut, but it was too late. The room began to change around her, the walls seeming to close in, the air growing colder and thinner. She could hear whispers now, voices coming from the shelves, from the very books themselves. They were calling her name, taunting her, telling her she would never leave. Panicking, she rushed to the door, but as the story predicted, it was locked. She banged on it, screamed for help, but the only response was the growing chorus of whispers. The light from the lamp flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Then the shadows began to move. They slithered off the walls, creeping towards her, growing taller and more defined. They took the shapes of people, figures she recognized from the photos and portraits she had seen in the library over the years. They were the authors, the scholars, the ones whose names had been written in the book before hers. They surrounded her, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Emily backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The room had become impossibly small, the walls pressing in on her. She could feel their cold presence, hear their whispers growing louder, more insistent. "You're one of us now," they hissed. "Your story ends here." Emily screamed, a primal, terrified sound that echoed in the small room, but it was no use. The shadows closed in and she felt a cold hand brush against her arm, then another on her shoulder. The darkness wrapped around her, suffocating her, pulling her down into the abyss. The last thing she saw before the world went black was the book, lying open on the desk, the words on the final page changing once more. And with that, Emily became a part of the Midnight Library, her story forever bound within its pages, just as all the others before her. When the library opened the next morning, everything was as it should be. The lights were on, the books neatly arranged on their shelves. The staff went about their duties, oblivious to the events of the previous night. No one noticed that Emily was missing, at least not right away. It wasn't until days later that someone found her belongings in the corner where she usually sat. The police were called, a search was conducted, but there was no trace of her. It was as if she had simply vanished. But the Midnight Library knew better. That night, long after the last student had left and the lights had dimmed, the door to the special collections room creaked open. Inside, the book lay on the desk, its pages rustling as if blown by an unseen breeze. A new name was written at the end of the list and a new story began to unfold, a story about a missing girl, a strange library, and a book that trapped the souls of those who dared to write their names within its pages. And as the clock struck midnight, the book closed itself with a soft thud, waiting patiently for the next curious soul to find it, and for the next story to begin. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more scary stories.